Captain Rebecca Hayes had been flying experimental aircraft for the Air Force for 12 years, but nothing had prepared her for the morning of October 15th when her entire world would change. The hangar at Edwards Air Force Base buzzed with the usual pre-flight activity as she approached her modified F-22 Raptor, designated Ghost 1. The aircraft looked identical to standard Raptors from the outside, but Rebecca knew the classified modifications hidden within its sleek frame made it unlike anything else in the sky. Her commanding officer, Colonel Marcus Drake, had been particularly dismissive during the morning briefing. Drake was old-school military, the kind of man who believed women belonged in support roles rather than cockpits. He had made his feelings clear from the moment Rebecca was assigned to the experimental program 6 months ago. "Hayes, you're flying a simple test pattern today," he had said with barely concealed disdain. "Try not to embarrass the program with any of your creative interpretations." Rebecca bit back her response, knowing that any sign of defiance would give Drake more ammunition against her. She had worked twice as hard as her male counterparts to earn her place in the program, and she wasn't about to let his prejudice derail her career. The experimental modifications to Ghost 1 were her brainchild, developed over months of collaboration with the engineering team. The aircraft's stealth capabilities had been enhanced with a revolutionary new radar signature manipulation system that could theoretically make it invisible to even the most advanced detection equipment. As she completed her pre-flight checks, Rebecca noticed something unusual in the aircraft's computer systems. A series of code sequences she didn't recognize were running in the background of the stealth system. When she questioned Master Sergeant Tony Rodriguez, the lead technician, he claimed ignorance. "Must be part of the new updates Colonel Drake authorized," Rodriguez said, avoiding eye contact. "Above my pay grade, Captain." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. Drake hadn't mentioned any system updates during the briefing, and protocol required her approval for any modifications to her aircraft. She made a mental note to investigate further after the flight, but time was running short. The test window was narrow, and delaying would give Drake another reason to question her competence. The takeoff was smooth, and Ghost 1 responded perfectly to her commands as she climbed to the designated altitude of 35,000 feet. The October sky was crystal clear over the Mojave Desert, with visibility stretching for miles in every direction. Rebecca began the prescribed test pattern, pushing the aircraft through a series of maneuvers designed to test the enhanced stealth capabilities. Everything seemed normal until her radar warning receiver suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. 4 F-35 Lightning II fighters had appeared on her scope, approaching from different vectors in what appeared to be an intercept formation. Rebecca's heart rate spiked as she realized they were closing fast, their targeting systems active. She immediately attempted to contact Edward's control tower, but her radio crackled with static. Something was very wrong. The lead F-35 pilot's voice crackled through the static on the emergency frequency. Unknown aircraft. You are flying in restricted airspace broadcasting an unidentified signature. Identify yourself immediately, or we will be forced to engage. Rebecca's blood ran cold. Unknown aircraft. Her transponder should have been clearly identifying her as Ghost 1 on an authorized test flight. She tried to respond, but her communication systems seemed to be malfunctioning, producing only garbled transmissions that the F-35 pilots couldn't understand. Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell was flying the lead F-35, and 20 years of combat experience told him something wasn't right about this intercept. The aircraft on his scope was broadcasting a signature he had never seen before. It appeared and disappeared from radar in patterns that defied conventional physics. His wingmen were reporting similar anomalies. "Ghost lead, this is Eagle 1, came the voice of his second-in-command, Major Lisa Chen. "That signature is unlike anything in our database. Should we proceed with weapons lock?" Mitchell hesitated. Standard protocol for unidentified aircraft in restricted airspace was clear, but something about this situation felt wrong. The aircraft's flight pattern wasn't aggressive or evasive. It seemed to be following a precise test route. His instincts, honed by years of combat missions, were screaming that this was friendly fire waiting to happen. "Hold weapons lock, Eagle flight. I'm moving in for visual identification." Rebecca watched in horror as the lead F-35 closed the distance, knowing that any sudden movement could be interpreted as hostile. Through her canopy, she could see the pilot's helmet as he maneuvered his aircraft alongside hers. She desperately tried to signal with hand gestures. Hopping the universal pilot signals would communicate her peaceful intentions. The F-35 pilot seemed to be studying her aircraft carefully, and she could see him speaking rapidly into his radio. Mitchell's eyes widened as he took in the details of the aircraft beside him. It was clearly a modified F-22 Raptor, but the paint scheme and markings were unlike any he had seen in the databases. More importantly, he could see the pilot clearly, a woman in standard Air Force flight gear, frantically trying to communicate through hand signals. This was no enemy infiltrator or stolen aircraft. This was a fellow pilot in distress. "Eagle flight, abort intercept," Mitchell commanded. "This is a friendly aircraft with apparent communications failure. Form up in escort formation and will guide them to the nearest friendly airfield." He switched to the emergency frequency and transmitted slowly and clearly. Hopping the unknown pilot could hear him. "Friendly aircraft, if you can hear this transmission, waggle your wings twice." Rebecca heard the transmission and immediately complied, rocking Ghost 1's wings back and forth. Relief flooded through her as she realized the F-35 pilots now understood she was friendly. But her relief was short-lived as she began to piece together what had happened. Someone had deliberately sabotaged her mission, programming her aircraft to broadcast an unknown signature that would trigger an intercept. In the wrong hands, this could have resulted in her being shot down as an enemy infiltrator. As the F-35s formed up around her in protective formation, Rebecca's mind raced through the implications. Colonel Drake's dismissive attitude, the unauthorized code sequences, Rodriguez's evasive answers. It all pointed to a deliberate setup. Someone wanted her mission to fail, and they didn't care if she died in the process. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell guided the formation toward Nellis Air Force Base, the nearest friendly airfield with adequate security clearance for the mysterious aircraft. During the 40-minute flight, he found himself studying the modified Raptor with professional curiosity. The aircraft's lines were subtly different from standard F-22s, suggesting significant internal modifications. Whatever program this pilot was part of, it was clearly highly classified. Rebecca used the flight time to run diagnostics on her systems, trying to understand exactly what had been done to her aircraft. The unauthorized code was deeply embedded in the stealth signature generator, designed to broadcast what appeared to be an enemy identification frequency. Worse, she discovered that her ejection seat had been tampered with, a small device attached to the firing mechanism that would have prevented it from functioning properly. Someone hadn't just wanted her mission to fail, they had wanted her dead. The landing at Nellis was smooth, and Rebecca was immediately surrounded by security personnel and intelligence officers. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell insisted on staying to debrief the incident, his instincts telling him this was bigger than a simple communications malfunction. As Rebecca climbed down from her cockpit, she was met by a stern-faced woman in civilian clothes who flashed an FBI badge. "Captain Hayes, I'm Special Agent Patricia Wong with the FBI's Counterintelligence Division," the woman said. "We need to talk immediately. Your aircraft was broadcasting a signature that matches known enemy infiltration codes. We have reason to believe someone at Edwards has been compromised." Rebecca felt a mix of relief and vindication. At least someone was taking this seriously. The debriefing lasted 6 hours, during which Rebecca detailed every aspect of the morning's events. Agent Wong took particular interest in Colonel Drake's behavior and the unauthorized modifications to her aircraft. When Rebecca mentioned the sabotaged ejection seat, Wong's expression became grim. "Captain, what you're describing isn't just sabotage, it's attempted murder. We're going to need your full cooperation to build a case." Meanwhile, back at Edwards Air Force Base, Colonel Drake was growing increasingly agitated. Ghost One should have been shot down hours ago, but reports were coming in that the aircraft had landed safely at Nellis under F-35 escort. His carefully orchestrated plan was falling apart, and he knew it was only a matter of time before investigators connected the dots back to him. Drake had been selling classified information to foreign agents for 3 years, skimming just enough to supplement his modest military pension while avoiding detection. Rebecca's experimental program represented a quantum leap in stealth technology, and his contacts had made it clear they wanted either the technology or the pilot eliminated. When bribery and intimidation failed to drive Rebecca from the program, Drake had decided on a more permanent solution. Master Sergeant Rodriguez sat in his quarters, staring at the burner phone Drake had given him months ago. The colonel had promised Rodriguez's gambling debts would disappear in exchange for small favors, installing unauthorized software, making minor modifications to aircraft systems. Rodriguez had convinced himself it was harmless until Drake asked him to sabotage the ejection seat. Now he knew he was in too deep to escape without consequences. Agent Wang's investigation moved swiftly. Phone records revealed communication between Drake and known foreign intelligence operatives. Financial records showed unexplained deposits into accounts controlled by both Drake and Rodriguez. Most damning of all, security footage showed Rodriguez accessing Ghost One's systems outside of normal maintenance schedules, always immediately after meeting with Drake. The arrest warrants were issued 72 hours after Rebecca's emergency landing. Drake was taken into custody during the morning briefing, his face a mask of shocked outrage as FBI agents led him away in handcuffs. Rodriguez, faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of charges including attempted murder, agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Rebecca found herself at the center of a media storm once news of the arrests broke. Headlines screamed about foreign espionage and attempted murder at America's most secretive air base. The attention was overwhelming, but she took satisfaction in knowing that her survival had exposed a dangerous security breach that could have compromised national security for years to come. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell visited Rebecca at Edwards 3 weeks after the incident. He had been following the investigation closely and wanted to personally thank her for her professionalism during the emergency. "You handled yourself like a true warrior up there," he told her. "In my 20 years of flying, I've never seen anyone maintain composure like that under such circumstances." The experimental program was temporarily suspended pending a complete security review, but Rebecca was assigned to a Pentagon task force investigating similar security vulnerabilities across the military. Her expertise in both advanced aircraft systems and counterintelligence made her invaluable to the investigation, which ultimately uncovered a network of compromised personnel across multiple installations. Drake's trial became a sensation, with details of his espionage activities dominating headlines for months. Prosecutors revealed that he had been feeding classified information to foreign agents for years, motivated by a combination of financial desperation and resentment toward military leadership. His defense attorney argued that Drake's actions were the result of mental health issues and career disappointment, but the jury was unsympathetic to a man who had tried to murder a fellow service member. The evidence against Drake was overwhelming. Phone intercepts revealed his frustration with Rebecca's success in the program and his determination to eliminate her as a threat to his espionage activities. Email records showed his communications with foreign handlers, including specific requests for information about stealth technology developments. Most damning of all, security footage showed him personally installing the device that sabotaged Rebecca's ejection seat. Rodriguez's testimony provided the final pieces of the puzzle. He detailed how Drake had gradually recruited him through a combination of financial pressure and appeals to his loyalty. What started as small favors, copying files, providing access codes, had escalated to direct sabotage of military equipment. Rodriguez broke down on the witness stand as he described his horror upon learning that the ejection seat sabotage was intended to kill Rebecca. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges against Drake, including espionage, attempted murder, and treason. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, noting that his actions had not only endangered national security, but had attempted to murder a decorated service member. Rodriguez received a 15-year sentence in exchange for his cooperation. Rebecca's vindication was complete, but the personal cost had been enormous. She had lost faith in the military hierarchy that had allowed Drake to operate undetected for so long. The stress of the investigation and trial had taken a toll on her relationships and her mental health. She found herself questioning whether she could continue her career in an environment where advancement often depended on the approval of potentially compromised superiors. The military brass made a point of publicly honoring Rebecca's service and her role in exposing the security breach. She was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for her actions during the emergency and promoted to major ahead of schedule. The ceremony was well attended by senior officers eager to demonstrate their support for her. But Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that some of them were more concerned about the program's reputation than her well-being. Agent Wang became an unlikely ally during the difficult months following the arrests. The FBI agent had developed a deep respect for Rebecca's courage and professionalism, and she made sure Rebecca understood that her survival had prevented a potentially catastrophic intelligence breach. "You didn't just save your own life that day," Wang told her. "You saved countless others by exposing Drake's network." The full scope of Drake's betrayal became clear as the investigation expanded. His espionage activities had compromised not just the experimental stealth program, but multiple classified projects across Edwards Air Force Base. Foreign intelligence services had been receiving detailed technical specifications, testing schedules, and personnel information for years. The damage to national security was incalculable, and it had all been orchestrated by a man motivated by greed and petty resentment. Rebecca's fellow pilots in the experimental program were initially skeptical of her claims, but as evidence mounted, they rallied around her with fierce loyalty. Captain David Thompson, who had been Drake's favorite before Rebecca's arrival, publicly apologized for his initial doubts. "I should have seen what Drake was doing," he admitted. "His favoritism, his attempts to undermine Rebecca, it all makes sense now. She was the only one brave enough to stand up to him." The technical investigation of Ghost 1 revealed the sophistication of the sabotage. The malicious code had been designed to gradually corrupt the aircraft's stealth signature over multiple flights, making it appear as though the system was naturally failing rather than being deliberately compromised. Only Rebecca's exceptional skill and the quick thinking of Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell had prevented a tragedy that would have been blamed on equipment failure. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell was promoted to colonel and assigned to lead a new security protocol development team. His decisive action during the intercept had not only saved Rebecca's life, but had also preserved crucial evidence that might have been lost if Ghost 1 had been shot down. He made a point of staying in contact with Rebecca, becoming a mentor and advocate for her career advancement. The media attention surrounding the case brought unwelcome scrutiny to Rebecca's personal life. Reporters dug into her background, looking for angles that would make their stories more compelling. Some focused on her gender, suggesting that Drake's actions were motivated by sexism rather than espionage. Others questioned whether she had somehow provoked the attacks through her aggressive pursuit of advancement in a male-dominated field. Rebecca found these narratives deeply frustrating. While she acknowledged that sexism had played a role in Drake's treatment of her, she insisted that the focus should remain on the national security implications of his betrayal. She gave carefully controlled interviews, always emphasizing that Drake's actions had endangered American lives and compromised military operations around the world. The Pentagon implemented sweeping security reforms in response to the Drake case. New protocols required multiple levels of approval for any modifications to experimental aircraft systems. Background checks were intensified for personnel working on classified programs. Most importantly, new procedures were established for reporting suspicious behavior by superiors, with protections for whistleblowers who came forward with concerns. Rebecca was asked to testify before Congress about the security failures that had allowed Drake to operate undetected for so long. Her testimony was measured and professional, focusing on systemic issues rather than personal grievances. She emphasized that the military's hierarchical culture made it difficult for junior personnel to challenge senior officers, even when they observed suspicious behavior. The congressional hearing was a turning point in Rebecca's career. Her poise under questioning and her thoughtful analysis of security vulnerabilities impressed both lawmakers and senior military officials. She was offered a position on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but she declined, preferring to continue her work in experimental aviation, where she felt she could make the most meaningful contribution. The experimental program resumed operations 6 months after Drake's arrest, with Rebecca as the new program director. Her first priority was rebuilding trust among the team members, many of whom had been traumatized by the revelation that their commanding officer had been a traitor. She implemented new communication protocols and created an environment where concerns could be raised without fear of retaliation. Ghost 1 was extensively modified and tested before returning to flight status. The aircraft systems were completely rebuilt with new security features designed to prevent unauthorized modifications. Rebecca personally oversaw every aspect of the rebuild, determined to ensure that no future pilot would face the life-threatening situation she had endured. The first test flight with the rebuilt Ghost 1 was an emotional moment for Rebecca. As she climbed into the cockpit, she thought about how close she had come to death in this same aircraft just months earlier. The memory of those F-35s closing in, their targeting systems active, would stay with her forever. But she also thought about Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell's split-second decision to investigate rather than engage, and how that decision had saved her life. The flight was flawless. Ghost 1's enhanced stealth capabilities performed exactly as designed, with none of the malicious interference that had nearly gotten Rebecca killed. As she executed the test pattern over the Mojave Desert, she felt a sense of closure and vindication. Drake's betrayal had not destroyed the program or her career. It had only made both stronger. Rodriguez was released from military prison after serving 8 years of his sentence, his cooperation with investigators having earned him a reduced term. He struggled to find employment with his military record tarnished by treason charges, but Rebecca surprised many by offering him a position as a civilian contractor with the experimental program. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she explained to critics, and Rodriguez paid a heavy price for his mistakes. The gesture was controversial, but Rebecca stood by her decision. She believed that Rodriguez's intimate knowledge of the sabotage techniques used by foreign agents made him valuable to security efforts. Under strict supervision, he helped develop new protocols for detecting unauthorized modifications to military aircraft systems. His remorse was genuine, and his expertise proved invaluable in preventing future security breaches. Drake died in federal prison 7 years into his life sentence, apparently from natural causes, though some suspected suicide. Rebecca felt no satisfaction at the news of his death, only sadness that a decorated military officer had allowed greed and resentment to destroy his life and endanger others. His betrayal had cost the nation millions of dollars in compromised technology and had put countless lives at risk. The legacy of the Drake case extended far beyond the experimental program at Edwards. Security protocols developed in response to his betrayal were implemented across all military installations, creating multiple layers of oversight for personnel with access to classified information. Rebecca's recommendations for protecting whistleblowers and encouraging reporting of suspicious behavior became standard policy throughout the Department of Defense. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, now a general, often spoke about the incident at military academies and training programs. He emphasized the importance of trusting one's instincts and taking time to assess situations before reacting. In that moment over the desert, he would tell young pilots, my training told me to engage an unknown target, but my experience told me something didn't add up. Always remember that technology can fail, but good judgment saves lives. Rebecca eventually transitioned from active duty to a civilian role with the Department of Defense, where she continued to work on advanced aviation programs. Her experience with Drake's betrayal had given her unique insights into security vulnerabilities, making her an invaluable asset in protecting America's most sensitive military technologies. She never regretted her decision to pursue experimental aviation, despite the dangers she had faced. The experimental stealth program that Drake had tried to destroy became one of the most successful in Air Force history. The technologies developed under Rebecca's leadership were eventually incorporated into next-generation fighter aircraft, giving American pilots unprecedented advantages in combat situations. The program's success was a fitting tribute to her courage and determination in the face of betrayal. Years later, Rebecca would often think about that October morning when everything changed. The memory of those F-35s surrounding her aircraft, their pilots ready to engage what they believed was an enemy infiltrator, served as a constant reminder of how quickly situations could turn deadly. But it also reminded her of the professionalism and courage of pilots like Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, who chose to investigate rather than destroy. The incident had taught her that betrayal could come from the most unexpected sources, but it had also shown her the importance of trusting her instincts and standing up for what was right. Drake's attempt to destroy her had ultimately made her stronger, more determined, and more committed to protecting the country she had sworn to serve.